Hi, everybody. Thank you to everybody who's here who I can't see, through the invisible audience, who will be visible at the end. And thank you, Ted and Robert, for coming and reading, sharing your work. I'm really excited because, well, I love both of your, your work. One of my first when I first started writing and taking myself seriously, my mentor, Stacy Somazek, gave your work to me, Robert, or told me to read your work, and your work has been really, really important to me and influential. And on my first trip to San Francisco, I met you, Ted, and I didn't know your work before I met you, but I was like struck by I don't know, I liked hanging out with you. I liked your presence, and I thought you were cute, and you were wearing this hat and it had little the ends of lighters on the brim, and I appreciated, I felt listened to when we hung out, and so I explored your work, and I thought it was really, really cool. And yeah, now here we are. I'm going to read a little intro to and bio for you, and then you'll read. Ted Rees is a poet, essayist, and editor. His most recent book of poetry, Thanksgiving, a Poem, published by Goliath Books in April, is a series of 498 interconnected haikus written during rounds of chemo. It is a book that is grounded in a fervent resistance to capital's tyrannical sequestering and reduction of perception beyond what can be used in a utilitarian exchange. Thanksgiving, a Poem, is sexy and sad and gloriously full of rage, ecstasy, delirium, and precarity. It is a linguistic exhaustion of excess, with a prosody that is abundant and loud, and in precisely measured noise mutations. It is the threshold orgasm landscape. I really loved the relationship between specificity, legibility, and naming in that book and in your first book. I felt like as a reader and then thinking about experience, like I was bobbing on the surface of the ocean, and then the ocean is reality, and above me is abstract thought, and below me is things, like concrete things, material things, blah, blah, blah. And I really liked how I felt like I was constantly bobbing or swimming or drowning in material excess, or reading things that were hinting at abstraction. And it felt super clear to me, and I loved it.
Saturdays at 5.
Saturdays at 5 in New York City. Where,
And yeah, I don't know. I thought it was really, really cool. I don't know. I fucking loved it. Anyways, your first book of poetry, In Brazen Fontanelle of Flame, was published by Timeless Infinite Light in 2018. Your chapbooks include The Soft Abyss, The New Anchorage, and Outlaws Drift in Every Vehicle of Thought. Recent essays by Ted have been published in the Poetry Project newsletter, Libertines, in the Empty Room of Love, Poets on Punk, Full Stop Quarterly, and On Contemporary Practices monograph on New Narrative. Ted is the editor-at-large for The Elephant, as well as the founder and co-editor of Assyrian Projects. He lives in Philadelphia with his husband and Pitbull. Please, everybody, welcome and clap and get excited, even though we can't see you. For welcome, Ted Rees.
Hi, I hope everyone can hear me. Just put in the chat if you can't. Thank you to Ven and Lonely and James and Artist Space for having me. It's really, yeah, it's a great pleasure. It's the first Zoom reading I've done, so I'm a little unaccustomed to doing so. But I hope that it goes okay. Yeah, I'm going to read from the 3 books that I finished writing since March. I obviously have not been going out much. So excuse me if some of this is a little, or it seems a little nutty. But I'm first going to read from this book that I wrote on this enormous scroll. I had a dream that I was writing a book on an enormous scroll, and while I couldn't exactly replicate the dream, because in the dream I was in a sort of endless white gallery space, like white walled gallery space, I just hung pieces of butcher paper in a room and wrote on them with Sharpie for several months. So first I'll read from that, and then I'll see how much time I have left and read from some other things too. So thank you again. And also, I mean, it probably goes without saying, but I'm so pleased to be reading with Bob, who is a tremendous influence on thought and feeling and the way that I experience reality, maybe? Yeah, I'd say so. So it's a real deep pleasure to be reading with Bob. To get even more cum. Greetings to the aerosol of my dread composition, porous yet inward. Use me quiet, use me brackish on a film, paddled, deep ingestion of an epoch, better left sorry, though not sans charm, less predictive, and more prone, watching the girls cluck about the yard. Our neighbors would shoot them and laugh at our shovels, feathers picked up by wind in search. Daisy-chained ghost. A romance of snipers, long waiting in goo. Please refrain from gendering this being a stick-up sweet thing, licked abyssal image feeling, my new dress, running my hands over absorption levels, the last fang, bullets, harmonizing, whistles, scales. Blew smoke through the hole the rectangle provided, shocking and perceptual odor unsmelled, simultaneous recurrence. I got it in me, stroked it some, huffed paint from a bag, sat in my Boyle collection tray called Afternoon this month, walking slowly through chlorinated water, your neck in my thumbs, fallibly moving upward in register, head in my hand, bus shelter. Inside my magma. Up in the rafters, knocking in the room adjacent, shadowing the wall how you stare, staring at the wall's strategy, suggested as cultural emblem there in the gutter, what amounts to dynamism squeezing dough in my roll, positioned 90 degrees from any island siren, inside my magma, bent at tribunal, a series regarding posture elevated toward your nipple, mouthing wildly, never, never resound again. Do people stay punk? When you shave in a ritual, this or that, refuse following you. Salad shouts. I studied sorghum and shedding myself in the kitchen by the butter rolls. Nudity and public access TV in the mid to late 1990s. Bottled tears in Jammed to Commitment, oddest syndication, those wispy, swollen years in abeyance. Dread's formality uploads me as I waltz into an unfamiliar honky-tonk. Band and good. Damned to salvage, explicate the tune she's humming. Mine to misplace, admit how often I jerk it in the cell, corpse at desk, cold palate, stiffening in grace of delusion. Terrible countenance being offered a bukkake scene, repression's fingers lollying my interstitial spaces shaved unevenly. Stands in the blue, in the foreground, the world is banned and good, shallow and wet in night's dark yard. Spake sodden. Give me the swimming pool of each swallow made over a lifetime of singing Jack and Jill, your finger in the morning in exaltation, shake it. Alone, you're all right, California. Didn't step outside, dipping down, genitally comfortable in an mini-mart bathroom. Video, 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 video. Number and name. Making water at Target, place of eels, of scalps, on hold as a bird listens in. We are sorry for the wait. Painted on jeans ain't it, but close to clicking it all ceases. I went out from myself, declaratory in lilacs. Public sculptures, vague, graceful. Always this excitation, first volleys of what's coming. Denied dread, I whisper in hoops, obscenity, obscenity, dying less fast today, perhaps. Exposed ribs frequency. The oranges. When curtains billow inward, flesh and argument ray flesh discontinued. In the light juggling 2 pairs of undies, and a bar or two, hum that one, goes, a tree planted by the water. Knew about the ass. Universe as set of stairs, to us a child is born. We all knew about the ass and said nothing in public. Neon of tooth and sears, hair in fist in chorus. They were on K2 when the sandbags failed. Time's rake, just a pinch. Tube sanguine above hip, unsure of this bowl of bile. Imprecision, helpless laughter. Whenever I read that last line, imprecision, helpless laughter, I think of this line from one of Bob's stories where he writes about kind of laughing as he falls down the stairs, or as his narrator falls down the stairs. So yeah, pretty, anyway, imprecision and helpless laughter. This one is called Your Bussy Would Get So Tired. Calc or troubled urn, providing boundary, womb. Get yourself some 41147s at the Harbor Freight. We'll reconnoiter here in an hour. Baked stringy, yep, caught in a scam, crossing myself, then singing empties round a curve. Ate the cans, nodded out in the pile of blood. Forbidding sleep addressed to dim concepts, French dipping logic, dignifying romance in this refrigerator box, with a blowy that woke up the pooches. I stay exulting in circular solitude, my buttocks milk crate world, metal like a slab. Of beef and gin's tourist city recalls the spongy aspects of the mouth. Darling of sacrifice here, belt a round out. Absorb what's through the furs. I sin never again. I glance at my erection, the valley low, the drought, the back of his neck. In the afternoon flesh, smacking each step, wine opening crisp missives, faggotry of thumb riding true in the treacle, mawkish under sable skies. To each a leprechaun voice, confusion, life as a hovering spatula, no better strategic implementation than the rack we all deserve. Technicolor of 80s peepholes, eggs, 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 forehead, gross, another galaxy. This is the last one that I'm going to read from that book. Stinky Rift. In the candy bars, a rare perception, exhaust fan blowing, cream grand, marquee idling, glazed on a payday. There is no motion if we are so damned, dope of the stinky rift cult, or outstretched arms beyond the great illusion. We kiss, and I say, look at the time, 5 on 8, ooze through plexi, enough regular to fill my boots with 10 billion drops of blood. Lower limits I fail to move on. All right on time. So the next couple of poems are from this manuscript that's it's called Economy, a Reshaped Spit. And it's the entire thing was written around phrases and words that were cut out from Wikipedia articles on people who disappeared mysteriously, and little bits from The Economist magazine. I don't really understand why that happened, but it did. It's The Economy, a Reshaped Spit. So here goes. Shackled lists of occupation and accounts of time, poking at your motes in the mirror, multiplicities of you since birth. How will I qualify to reek of hydrangea and urine? A teen fudges a rollie while moping behind me, familiar melody that burnt glass tube. Sometimes we are our forensics team in poor resolution clipping, burnt popcorn and oil and verdure like a stiffy are chewing us as we're giving the peace sign, and they note it in the database. Trace to forgiveness, where ways deep as pasture wand rich cell phone video with sexual porridge across the Midwest. Depressing couple of years flavoring a damaged box of Franzia, efficient peril moving alleged mountains, their crisis just accent to the real. Our spectacles reflect this terrarium of failure plinth, affectively disordered, slowly in the branches rumbling, self as a deepening of blood setting into sofa fabric, canceled carpet, daddy yum, a bus can count him, ping-ponging angles blubber, grainy footage, banter this global position thrown to the waves. He finds himself on a frame, slack blue, thus redoubtable in its smudgy shriek. Come and knock on our door, who beyond the structureless salmon shorts of our despondence remains callous in uproar, age of 26. The wrong people approach the rifle. I love a man in traffic, men in traffic, tents in the clovers. This one I wrote this one is in memoriam of Sean Bonney. The problem, he was saying, is Chuck Banderol slobber. Aren't any papers in this our daily hibernation's colors? The problem was last seen everywhere the problem was, too inward to ever float. Whiskers in a minor key drone, more like a whale or a keen, were edges, comme ci, comme ça, ya. Later that morning, the problem was runny eggs or the morning itself. I tug at my left nipple, reading Notley by candlelight in a van, screw work, nuzzled burden of verse. There is no romance mowing the lawn. The problem was the lawn. could not recognize the faces standing over me. Did you sing your chomps into your fragmentary subjecthood, or did you unmute the problem? Was witnessed by a neighbor, the apparition that is melody, Tool, Demonstrous, Sin City, Dairies, Thlubumph. We misremember words. We summon a directory of murmuring alleys, all our harms like weaver birds. Once declaimed an ode to an intoxicated witness, considered the valley in mud after being prompted. Echoes in patches removed, packed in boxes willingly, citing these terrors. Partially undressed and crying, I didn't feel like talking. The firm walls surfaced. Foul trouble through a courtyard with peeling paint. The exception relied more and more on consuming the age of the suffering it embodied. Boomlet in hell, a blue blazer, human scalp, cropland thicker, a shadow sex recurring. Confirmed buzz as well as terrestrial animals likely to weaken. In plots regaled by flippant vandals, any sparrow sings, then halts as you approach. What of sloppy tubes running, rearing their legs, given what some call the past, a diurnal memorial, wearing a brick smock, thus in appearance. The year of the stripped screw, one jagged finger in the pail catching roof water, 6 subject titles of ongoing threads. Less an inch from my damn face is air or a reasonable alternative. I would love a bite of your lava cake, afflicted as I am by ongoing cycles of spew and cool and sun. Since cling film's déclassé, we had to search for a novel textile that wrapped itself in what was, coming like piffs of fungal spores, shovels and fresh clay, the flimsy narrative of the tense. What a shrug to power signifying its grim persistence, ending in a reefer and some guys checking something out on the roof. The party line is rags left behind in gray matter. Has me thinking about dinner. Got packets of Bernard championed by no one, elbow cradling head against slab bench, like traditional love, directionless and punitive, such membrane of families, gushy peepers in the morn. Demands of so-called rationality buckling, chain link, a frilly new means of extending ourselves to questions ranging from barking to sly fleur-de-lis spray painted on the tough shed. The sky is changing and the mortar thins. These are lessons qua saltines with government jam, and the gallery fills with smoke of hypersonic trance that runs things, a plot that ends in a cardboard box generation and paranoid circle rituals. For clarity's sake, I am at home but done with all that. Shorn temple bathed in sin and lesser missiles, loafing for a loaf. We are ultimately flimsy. Hot dogs, get your hot dogs, foreclosed in that sense. Stuck in the ravines we constructed but unable to cry or comprehend our lack of marrow, how we once scooped it out of ourselves like little canoes in a wilderness where to cry was lit and we were undressed. My pouty lips made you sad and we were without clothes, laconic, ready to strafe our notions of will in our birthday suits. Birthmark on my inner thigh, a healthy ration of scars inedible despite your tonguing that makes for laughter. Shaking my memory will waste its sweetness always on misallocation of my senses rising toward outer orbs and you, damned like me in a bush wiping sweat from neck down. In search of a better salted cellulose flake, I wish to sleep with the ghost in this ceiling, in the basement. Never heard that track before. It's taking me for a swishing, the glass of the immediate. Shadow wrestling heat wants summer hits from below, and we all need dental work. Was it 15 years ago in a gold Aerostar? And was there a stashed wad of bills and heavy weeds pillaging asphalt? Density of a speck of Chengdade, this eternal recurve shot. New life, no life. Rather, it's what they eke, body like juice consecrated in cellophane, doing trouble or a ditty, and if I should falter, a living, a metaphor for a wall, damn libretto souping through my panties as wage, or opening eyes wide and plowing through, will never be this young again. So thresh laborers in abstruse skin slaps, a parody kissing abdomen vitamin lips, cheap tile, cheap in nearby brick kilns, pumping out what slurs, epistemology that dances for money. Boom, boom, or by the airport extended stay hotels, I huff euphemism for sport each night, like Paps took long walks, and we only had one tub covered in cum, distilling moonshine. You put in the video, and there's a phantom, then crunching as the machine poofs out animal trails of smoke. Repetitive pronoun weeping confusedly over raw chicken flesh, focusing the mind on its hinterland, stroking mold spores on a neighbor's stucco. What do you recommend me? Looking proximal to ratty Snoopy slippers, my zone is wire and wandering, key in hand, through chronicles of false doors, theory, with its ombre and insistence, right on the village green. Scenic accents were wooks and casualties, sucker punched in grime at low tide. Rhythm and abandon, storms in spring. Lewd whispers and warnings, some gates on the road. Persistent secret awes me and heavily fills me, various papers scattered around. So that's that. And now the last couple minutes. I didn't really write these, but I found a copy of Robert Bly's Silence in the Snowy Fields. And I hate Robert Bly. I just think it's like terrible crap. But what I decided to do, because I was bored and stoned one day, was to do an erasure of the entire book. So I just erased the whole book and did a bunch of poems. So the titles are also equally erased to be pretty ridiculous, and the poems are fun, I think. Sometimes ominous, very fun, but a bit of both maybe. So, now Ember, speak, frail concierge. The new clouds exhaust the west. Death skiff, death you sang now. Oh, art. Morning, flesh, wrapped green. I dreamt, bathed like any blade, to disappear into the dust. This is my favorite title, actually. The old Magna Carta. Just sounds like a little like, you're gonna do a jazz dance. The girl in the window, the doomed galleons, the blossoms, still shocking. Hot, excited swallows. Now, at noon, hot bean and sturdy, heavy, close to the ground. Inside me, swallows, excited, open mouths as if into a river. driving through Ohio. Country, 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 country. National Geographics. Torpid, leaning into the ground. The sense of death. I am full of love. Prion. I felt my heart sour. I fell asleep. Thin wires. I awoke. To see nothing, to see no one, to go down. A ladder. I love, I will waste more time. Nigh. If I think, if I had thought, plowing through joy, sleeping, sleeping, asleep, carrying loam, asleep, skating, and soon swallowed, suddenly. Sick. Clear, muffled, muffled, lonely, unchristened, wandering. My body, a pen, cup, the pastures, the sloth, the stones, looking, searching, moving, lying. And then this is the last one and my last poem. Thank you again to Ven and Lonely and James and Artist Space and Bob. It's will be yeah, such a great pleasure. So, oh, all in the after. Ooh. Ass half covered, little ass, which we never noticed, farther away, growing, full, and moving toward us now, like a Hulk ass. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ted Rees, everybody. You're going to get your applause. Don't worry, I can't wait until the audience can express orally their satisfaction. We're going to take a quick 10-minute break. I would please ask that everybody consider donating to the Segue Foundation. We are paying the readers. We pay all of our readers, and your donations go directly to that. So there's going to be a graphic up for 10 minutes. It's going to let you know how you can donate to the Segue Foundation, and we'll see everybody in 10 minutes. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the second half of the Segue Reading Series. We're just going to jump right in. Robert Gluck formed the new narrative movement with Bruce Boone in the 1970s when he notes that language writing and gay identity were in their heroic periods, both of which being constructs that led Gluck to develop a new form of writing. Although at first glance, new narrative seems as if it were established in contradistinction to language poetry, one focusing on the radicality of the subject and the other rejecting the continuity of the self and the romanticism of identity entirely. Gluck was attracted to language for its Puritan rigor in achieving infinite valences compared to the perhaps more lackadaisical or languid approaches of the Beats or the New York School. And in a bizarre way, new narrative sprouted sideways out of language writing by taking some of its fundamental theoretical tenets about the linguistic generation of meaning and reintroducing the question of representation, problematized along queer lines with a political urgency fomented by the oppression of the homosexual as an identity category. New narrative endlessly interrogates and complicates itself, incorporating, quote, daydreams, night dreams, the act of writing, the relationship to the reader, the meeting of flesh and culture, the self as collaboration, the self as disintegration, the gaps, inconsistencies, and distortions of the self, the enjambments of power, family, history, and language, end quote. It is an intermingling of high and low culture, theory and gossip, fantasy and truth, intention and chance, pornography and gospel. Gluck systematized the advancement of this new form through hosting readings and leading workshops out of a bookstore in San Francisco, attracting acolytes such as Steve Abbott, Camille Roy, Dodie Bellamy, and Kevin Killian. He also formed the Black Star series with Bruce Boone to promote their movement through indie publication. Many other writers in their orbit put out little magazines that disseminated the ideology they were hashing out together. According to Gluck, the heyday of new narrative, its own heroic period, lasted about a decade. Luckily, we have now entered a stage of cultural revisitation where the movement is receiving sustained attention as it is being canonized in an academic context and overlooked texts are being brought back into print. This is evidenced in part by a definitive anthology, Writers Who Love Too Much, edited by Dodie Bellamy and Kevin Killian and put out by Nightboat in 2017. That press also recently released Beautiful Aliens, a Steve Abbott reader, bringing his work to a new audience. Semiotext is another publisher heavily invested in supporting the legacy of new narrative, publishing books by and about Dodie Bellamy, Kathy Acker, and Chris Kraus, among others, and bringing back into print the memoirs of recently departed luminary Kevin Killian. Gluck's own texts, including the story collection Denny Smith and the novel Jack the Modernist, have been a little hard to come by in recent years, garnering the reputation of out-of-print cult classics, but that seems to be quickly changing, with Semiotext releasing Communal Nude, his collected essays, in 2016, and New York Review Books Classics this year reprinting his groundbreaking title, Marjorie Kemp, which Gluck calls, quote, a novel of obsession, grief, and farce, loss of self, and excess of self, end quote. The eponymous hero is a failed saint who wrote what is widely recognized as the first autobiography in English, circa 1430, and who Gluck reanimates in all her eldritch Catholic perversity, stirring up shit wherever she pilgrimed due to the greedy and carnal nature of her lust for Jesus Christ. But this is not straightforward historical fiction because it is constantly folding in on itself. This happens through the conflation of Kemp's intense affair with Jesus and Gluck's own obsessive desire for his lover, circa the early 90s, only identified as L. Gluck writes that, quote, the two stories merge to become one. Bob becomes Marjorie, L becomes Jesus. Bob's ability to enter the 15th century is underwritten by Marjorie's own travel through time to the events of Jesus' life, end quote. Marjorie Kemp is a context through which Bob can read his own desires. Her audacity is boundless and extremely dangerous because of how it threatens the preconceptions and positions of those around her, those with more control. She, like her husband Jesus, disempowers those who believe they can manipulate her through sheer insistence on an invisible system that overrules all established social orders. The holy is queer and the queer holy. This novel explodes the erotics of worship, maybe even in a way that a prudish supplicant might find profane, especially considering how it revels in the pornographic underpinnings of the sacrament and the inevitable sexuality of an embodied God. As Colm Tobin notes in his introduction to the new edition, quote, the novel allows religious devotion itself to soar above the mere business of prayer and obedience into a realm that is filled with the possibilities of bliss and fulfillment, not only for the soul, but for the body, end quote. Kemp's physical and emotional connections to Jesus are described in fervent detail, and this is a savior prone to moods and perplexities who comes and pisses and shits. Rather than reading these vivid descriptions as sacrilegious, Tolkien wisely points out, quote, this is no more blasphemous than Renaissance paintings showing Jesus' bare legs and thighs, his naked torso, his face in ecstasy and agony, end quote. This is a novel full of delightful pyrotechnic set pieces and enigmatic layering, telling multiple stories at once, sort of like how the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost exist as individual entities that are the same unified thing. It is a seminal text of new narrative and highly deserving of its new place within the exalted catalog of New York Review Books classics. The new narrative movement, by the way, while it has functioned as a localized, community-based historical phenomenon, also exists as a set of tools and a distinct mode of expression that has influenced countless writers far and wide and will definitely continue to do so. Please welcome to your screens the one and only Robert Gluck. Hold on, I have to unmute you. Let's see.
Is
There
that
you go.
good?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Ah, well, what a wonderful introduction. Thank you. And thank you, Ted. You are dear to me. I'm going to read for 30 minutes, just to say. I'm going to begin with a poem that I've been working on for many years. It's called I Boombox. The title actually gives you an idea of how many years I have been working on it. It's assembled from my misreadings. I just keep a journal and keep track of them. So in that sense, it's an autobiography in which I dream on the page. It's my version of the modernist long poem. I plan to keep at it. It's a very skinny poem. It's about 4 syllables a line. And it's now about 105 pages. I'll keep at it. Like other modernist long poems, it will be only interrupted by my death. So I'm just picking a part from the middle, and beginning in the middle and ending in the middle. X spices wheel around a dazed world. Gender chaos. Snowball with the taste of the anus. What's brutally, well, you'll see. Well, I mean, you're unconscious, you know. He had an ambulance of that in his blood. Cold took the form of white meat with guns. Current of intimate frustration. Mere contingencies grinding on his messianic loins. Forsaken pics. Its testicles tickle the funny bone, or they troll a great loss. A polka dot appears and is put to rest. An unformed stranger, an apricot hand worried his fingers into my back. A myrtle in my butthole, my tiny pink tailgate. A new hate for Santa Fe Opera single shingle house, the scandal-clad logo of the prenatal sink, the fountain of no splash. LOL designs. Sconce with utopia-shaped free Obama sticker. Hot bottom needs 2 bipeds. I like it when I'm powerless to help somebody mail. eBay no longer remembers deadliners or the disinterested utopian screens, the longing to be a fragment, the word-eating marble. I blow my lord in the tent of tomorrow. A map of your love, Plutarch tells us. Sturgeon of Eros, portable or breakdown with the window design of your thrusting as I agonize. Mercilessly reconstructed mechanism, chlorine or wet blood extortions, panic trips from takeout pros. Nude shower for voters, throwing water at them was handy, grind building the milking of individual singers. Dr. Anomie, fun with offshore men or snuff like that. Bare tops to fight back. Hitchcock fought relations with those ice blondes. The liberty is a wasteland in frolicking light or round brimstone hat, or a plot remains disordered in Iraq desert. Habitat planets where weather went to vanish, the dialectics of the clans. The unproductive will always be busy, nothing making your clothes last. Try to retake vital Africa, Iceland was a precious possession, a place for pimping in the evening when the heart breaks. Old memories and young herpes. Crying cleanses the wound. Bumbling through language, thanks to innovations, he invented readers, fatally registered trademarks. Cardio cowboy, he wants to bed the center of attention. Hank's uncut anus bouche. Top daddy for ruin. Wipe the cock off your face. Overexposed MWM will suck you, drive you, the rust-eyed Chevy trading pecs, glimpses of passionate scenery. Renowned lightweight, able to de-story the distinction between life and death. The breast in us doesn't care. He breathes fresh eros in 1874 when J.G. Gilden took two wives and twisted them together. The tight grip of female torsos, truffles on the edge of a skirt. Humberg spiral, the wingtip genius into the amorous masses. He stank into the bath. Gambling with hives, strands of vibrator slime, the scrambled seeds of America. Or the Deutsche grandmother released the padded rink of conversation, existential record collection in his cold armchair, as an endless audience member celebrating dominant machines that darken control. Polymorphous armchair, how soft its bed against your dozing back. Consciously sleeping. The medication tape says put a blue ball of light in my right hand or a red ball of light in my left. Marijuana latches onto the eternity of bizarre, bringing new flour to roast, breaking bowels. Are academics just villagers at heart? Marjorie Perloff breeding Frank O'Hara? Somebody held my hand at the edge of the paragraph. The verbal world swarmed 100 jumping details until her tears ached. What spanked your desire to write about borderline collie? The world was once an immense orgasm, synchronies of recognition, legs suspend my whole in space. To have a bulldog stand by strong design principles, Taliban tiles, or the post-1967 terrorist tug of war, or their accommodations are in a state of despair. I also enjoy guns my own age. Oakland's antique row retarding downstairs by ruining rats through mazes, the dead end of Ended Street. The bourgeois enigma zone, one-stop Christmas for cave dwellers. Adam Bomica, unlettered actress filled with emotion of devastated by Katrina, the sublet of the documentary End of Days. Dead by the sea season, cold cuts confounding dirt. Departure inferno. Bricks mitigate gently apart when epidermis strikes, inspired by Lincoln's wounds. Pour immortality over the suburbs. Nobody enjoys death. Wrongful Baroque. The old wind stirs birds in heavy geometry. The dawn has no commercial pilot, forward by 3 to disappear inside you. So I adjust to your condom. The music of longing is forever. You spill the sugar when you life the spoon. I am female and ricocheting. My prostate was closer to leaning a staggering rum rebellion. Married seeking direction, a minestrone film. Living on the molasses of gossip, made of luxurious rustle, depraving SF's neighborhoods by the police. So that is a chunk of that. Now, where are we? Okay. I'm going to read, it's the first time I did it, some of the chapbook that Ted and Levy Bentley published on their Asterion projects. This is what it looks like. It's called Pain. And on the other side is Camille Roy's Reading My Catastrophe. What a nice cover. And it's, I see it as different from what I usually write, since it didn't hurt to write it exactly, and it doesn't have as many obstructions. I'm just telling you what happened. So some of the, and it's really grew out of just a report I was making, an email report to friends. If some of this report is redundant, please forgive. I have not been in touch with some of you, and I want to tell you about my health situation. On June 5th, 2018, I became sick. My fever over 104 degrees and never below 100. Night sweats and grotesque pain in my back and later in my right leg as well. My illness could have been related to my inflammatory arthritis or not. How to best get out of bed? That was the question of the moment. The answer, not without hydrocodone. I had no appetite. I ate pudding and ice cream. The desire for ice cream, apparently the last shake of the snake's tail. A long-planned dinner on June 6th was mixed into the beginning of my illness. I would cook for my dear friend Jocelyn and for Stephen and Daniel, the Ducky Browns. How I wanted to please them. For months, I had fashioned elaborate menus with my husband Chavi. Egg pasta baked in muffin tins, the nest containing a smoked scallop and held together by savory custard. Duck legs, red onions, and Napa cabbage braised in balsamic vinegar and thyme-infused duck stock. The sicker I became, the simpler the menu. With each loss, I contorted inside. Finally, we agreed that our guests would bring pizza and the joy of being together would delight us enough. But as the day approached, I could not conceptualize dinner or the outlandish notion of sitting up for 3 hours. Jocelyn called. You sound confused. Yes, confused. You don't sound like yourself to me. I don't sound like me to myself, I agreed. She texted, when should we come over? How are you feeling? I marshaled my resources and replied, I could not answer her increasingly urgent texts. Jocelyn and the Ducky Browns arrived in a state of alarm, expecting to find me dead on the floor. Instead, they found Chavi home from work, who mildly said I was sleeping. I woke at 5:30 and called to settle our dinner plans. For some reason, Chavi was sleeping by my side, hard to fathom, but what wasn't? Jocelyn whispered, it's 5:30 in the morning. Are you okay? I could not answer her question or any question. I said, our dinner was, and I could not say tomorrow or yesterday or any word of more than 2 syllables. On the narrow path of a sentence, a 3-syllable word stopped me as though it were a brick wall. But I smiled and shared the joke the next day with the ambulance medics on our way to the emergency room. Apparently my aphasia was a drug reaction and it quickly subsided, but losing the ability to shape experience was a first feeling of retreat. In the next bed, behind a curtain, an old man with cellulitis flirted with the nurses in a querulous voice. Hello, darling, want to make me feel better? A nurse asked him, where do you live? How many stairs do you climb to enter your house? Why do I have to answer these questions? I've answered these questions 3 times today. Just go to the computer. You have all of this information in the computer. His mood darkened and he shouted when they touched him, Jesus, fuck me. What the fuck are you doing? Fuck me, you bitch. At one point in his rant, he volunteered, my girlfriend says she don't want to live with me. Chavi read Spring and Summer of Brandon Brown's The 4 Seasons, and I felt actual desire for Jell-O. At 2 in the morning, I was released. 2 weeks later, my fever was 104. I spent 6 or 7 hours with Chavi in the ER, and at 3 in the morning, I was admitted, assigned to a room, and put into a wheelchair by a buff Asian. He asked what I was reading. A book of poems. A book of poems, he scoffed, incredulous. Well, read me one. So traveling in the middle of the night through Kaiser's half-lit corridors, my tech guy and anyone else who cared to listen heard the beginning of winter. I went to the land of the dead, and it was better there than here. No, it wasn't better. He really enjoyed it. Here we have miso soup and Bob's burgers and the clear paws in stubbornly falling snow spread across grass as smooth as a smooth lid over which our little kid footprints rhythmically puncture as you cross the yard. The trouble was that my illness could not be identified. Fever of unknown origin. I was lost because without a diagnosis, I could not be treated or even recognized. My nameless pain, what was it like? Second by second, week by week, bolts of lightning. Long ago, I was hit in the head hard enough to see stars, realizing that cartoon cliche. Likewise, zigzags capture the shock of pain, if not the drone of continuous ache, small wave after small wave. I was caught without protection, weeping forever, inconsolable like Dido in the needlepoint, a vast slow motion collapse. Was it lead poisoning, trichinosis? Climbing out of bed to my feet, climbing towards the impossibly distant bathroom, was 100 on a scale of 1 to 10. Did I have 2 illnesses? At one point it seemed that a damaged liver was the cause, or a predicament in the liver's region. Jocelyn wanted me to make plans, to militate, to organize. She scraped me out of bed and took me to her dear chiropractor, Barbara Berkeley. My passivity scared Jocelyn. I was disappearing. She was losing me. Without hunger, food was repellent, and as for sex, I was prepubescent. You do what? Ugh. Nevertheless, I masturbated to see if my body could give me something besides atrocious pain. That was drudgery. I managed to come, but the orgasm was not a success. In fact, it felt kind of ugly. Then again, was the disease hiding in my bone marrow? Because I was a mystery, the head of infectious diseases, Dr. Volk, and the head of rheumatology, Dr. Fong, treated me. Was the back pain a more recognizable problem than the fever and the dreary night sweats? The doctors couldn't put it together. Without a diagnosis, I could have died. My medicines warn of drastic side effects. The course of steroids could depress me, and did they ever? Endless blubbering. I thought they would make a big change. They clarified pain rather than banished it. The neuropathy medicine comes with 2 or 3 pages on how I might kill myself and the signs to look for. My pain pills warn of constipation and loss of appetite. I could write a chapter on constipation, the dire struggle with my sphincter to free a ping pong ball. I lost 30 pounds, the dazed feeling of starving while food is everywhere. I look like a sick person with yellow skin and skinny arms and legs. When I feel my butt, I have the perverse sensation of touching a butt of an 8-year-old boy. I developed a twitch, a tremor. Texting is challenging and anything can appear on the iPhone screen. Sometimes I feel intolerably itchy, other times dizzy and spaced out, trembling, sleep disruption, emotional fragility. I started crying at the farmer's market. I don't mean sniff, sniff. I mean, wah. Javi put me in the corner till I calmed down. It was hard, or rather impossible, to get pain relief from my callow primary physician, Dr. Fagan. This fey young man blathered about his uncle's addiction to opioids and prescribed hydrocodone laced with Tylenol setting a limit because too much would harm my liver. It was like using a paper napkin on a tsunami. When Dr. Fagan was trying to convince us, or himself, that he'd taken every path imaginable, he twined his arms and legs around each other like a nervous fourth grader. None of his decisions was based on our conversations. When I got really angry, he arched his eyebrows and nodded as though I were the fourth grader. I couldn't make a conversation about pain meds happen. Then he turned around and prescribed 60 milligrams of morphine 3 times a day. Was he kidding? Was this revenge prescribing? My friend Denny was indignant that I suffered so much and scandalized by a medical establishment that hoards pain relief, guarding its cornucopia like Scrooge. Occasionally, Denny gave me methadone. That worked amazingly well. I had an ultrasound to see if the nodule on my kidney was a cyst or a tumor, a colonoscopy to see if something was wrong there, an MRI that indicated inflammation, a test of my prostate, tests for clots and colitis, a CAT scan to see if veins were clogged in my left shoulder, more CAT scans, tests on my liver, more scans on my enlarged spleen. These obscure regions stepped briefly into the spotlight. During my first ultrasound, the nurse maneuvered the scope around my big belly, and Chavi and I thought, do we have a baby? I do have a few cysts, but even a tumor would not have explained my random symptoms. I wished for a vicious cancer, easy to remove, to make sense out of the chaotic months. I sweat during the day, even without a fever, and the horrid night sweats come with big dreams. Some were biblical, togas by the Tiber or the Jordan. They all included water. I was a huge bivalve, like a muscle, and I dramatically projected different selves into the world like scarves shot out of a cannon. When Chavi returned from work, it disturbed him to learn that I had spent the whole day at home. So I took a double dose of hydrocodone and dragged myself to a cafe, inching along the sidewalk with a cane, praying a skateboarder didn't plow into me. That was a crash course on being very old. Oddly, my peers, the elderly and infirm, became visible in surprising numbers. I was infantilized with praise for climbing a few steps. Very good, Bob. I grew impossibly white, larval, turn the rock over, Bob scuttling toward the shadow. Chavi brought me music and a jigsaw puzzle to combat boredom, but I was never bored. I could lie forever on my side, enthralled by pain, with anguish moist and fever dew. On the other hand, I was so boring. Poor Chavi. What is there to say when turning in bed is an event? I couldn't eat, and I left the table repelled by the sight of Chavi eating. Freud observed that the chronically ill are narcissistic. It's not my sickness, it's our sickness. I spent a happy day with my son Rees. He came home from China for a month of July. With his help, I was able to work a little in the ceramics studio, and we went out for a perfect lunch, a day without fever. Could I be getting better? A clear summer day, rare in San Francisco, warmth with a chill. It was like hell. Then I could walk to a cafe slowly. Now, a week later, I am in bed with a pillow between my knees, and the question is, can I get myself to the toilet? I can't straighten my right leg, and for some reason, my snot is black. Endless tears, like breathing, like swimming, the monotony of a crying baby. The pain is worse, and I need help. At physical medicine, Dr. Toy asked Chavi if he is my caretaker. Dr. Toy prescribes an injection in my spine. Chavi takes me to appointments and asks the questions, Denny too, and Jocelyn. Chavi stays with me during the interminable emergency room visits that continue into the night and early morning. When I say, go home and get some sleep, he jerks his head as though shooing a fly. Camille calls every night and sometimes brings dinner. If I have reached some kind of pain med limit, I need to know that. I would like to get out of bed. Why are night sweats so disheartening? Fluid my body is supposed to contain. The sopping t-shirt, the sheets fouling the world with my illness. Then climbing back into the cold weather, spreading a towel as my mother did when I pissed the bed. I saw plenty of TV, including Jane Mansfield's last film on Amazon Prime, Single Room Furnished. What a godsend TV is to those who need to throw their time away. It's a kind of movie you see for no reason. In this film, Mansfield wanted to demonstrate that she was also an actor. Single Room Furnished is the most frantically distraught film I ever saw on every level, from art direction to casting. It was sick with the poetry of despondent souls living in flophouse isolation in the tawdry 60s, though more like the tawdry 50s. Rees came another day when I was not in good shape. No, I was not getting better. He had the, humanity to climb into bed and hold me without saying a word. We had a tiny early birthday party for him on Sunday, July 29th, his 25th. I could barely walk across a room, but nothing stopped me from obtaining the correct birthday cake, a complex chocolate discus from Craftsman and Wolves. Then I was finished with walking and getting out of bed, a turning point. I felt a weird physical chaos or stuttering. Regrets appeared orderly as PowerPoint. First, shit, I haven't finished my novel, which I have finished now. Second, I felt a pang of sadness for Rees. Would he lose another parent so soon after Angie's death last summer? Angie was Camille's partner. Third, I regretted cramming this house full of my obscure enthusiasms, ceramics, art, random collections in the back of closets and shoeboxes in the basement, on the top of bookshelves, on the top shelves of cabinets. I did not include Xavi in my list of regrets. Even in my dreams, I can't be without him. Another thought. An old gay couple in the house behind mine are high-end realtors. And during my building project, they found a way to manipulate the building inspector. I wonder if they paid him to force me to repair their foundations. It was my plan to hear one day that one of them had died and to briefly enjoy the complexity of my feelings. But now it was my death that they would hear about in passing. A few days earlier, on the 26th, Denny and Xavi brought me to South San Francisco to get a PET scan. The Lyft driver brought us to a log cabin restaurant. He was annoyed that I wouldn't get out, and the discussion became heated before we could sort out the vagaries of street numbers on El Camino Real. At the clinic, the nurse told me constantly how comfortable I would be. I was abandoned for 50 minutes in a strangely shaped chair in a chilly cabin as cold radioactive potion spread through my veins. Take your time, the technician shouted as he pushed me into the machine. PET scans are mainly used to detect cancer by locating areas of unusually rapid cell production. Why did they wait 2 months to administer this scan since they were looking for cancer all along? One doctor was convinced I had leukemia, but the PET scan suggested I might have a bacterium. The kind Dr. Chu informed me of this by phone on July 30th, 4 days after the scan. He seemed perplexed that no one had contacted me, and he told me to go to the emergency room in San Francisco. Then in the middle of the night, an ambulance took me across the bridge to Oakland Kaiser, where the spine team is. I was strapped into a gurney, of course, but I have the impression of a night and a highway empty of everything but lights. I had another MRI which confirmed the diagnosis: a bacterium is eating the bone and muscle of my lower back. This is a better diagnosis than tumors or leukemia because it is possible to be completely cured of a bacterium. The surgery was scheduled for 2 o'clock on July 31st, that is the same day. Xavi and I were so aware of our fears that we didn't bother to express them. I said goodbye and was wheeled away, but I got to the prep room and learned that I had been bumped to 8, so I was wheeled back. I called Xavi feeling a little desperate, and he returned to the hospital. Then at 8, I eased myself onto a high gurney and met a team of doctors led by the surprisingly young Dr. Calvin Kuo, who explained that he would not know the extent of the damage till he looked inside. He had been operating all day, but he was shining with awareness. He said he might have to enter from both the front and the back. I realized I am porous, to Dr. Quo. Then I was anesthetized. The next day, Dr. Quo said the surgery took 4 hours. One vertebra was collapsing into another, the cause of most of my pain. He cleaned out pus and rotten bone and muscle and installed a carbon-based cage stabilized by titanium screws to keep vertebrae 4 and 5 apart while they fuse over the next 6 months. Between the vertebrae, he placed a lattice of human skeleton for the bone to grow over. Isn't that incredible? But what bacterium? How did it enter my bloodstream? This was almost 2 months from the beginning of my illness. The pain from the operation was serious, but not overwhelming, like the pain before. Just hours after surgery, my walking was better. Jocelyn said I was a different person night and day. I was not hungover from the anesthetic. I was awake for the first time in months. The incision was sewn with thick braided ribbons, like lying on a nest. For some reason, I had a superb room, 2 picture windows framing the mild bowl of the Oakland Hills. The crappy old hospital that blocked this view was getting knocked down that very week. Random staff wandered over to the windows and stared out in wonder. Camille visited my luxury room. Later, she observed that I seemed softened by what was happening to me, tender. I took her hand. I love you, Camille. Of course, staying in the hospital has its own drama with its own cast of characters. A physical therapist seemed urgent to show me what color my piss should be. Too much hydration, too light. Too little hydration, too dark. The night nurse, after 4 or 5 painful failures, called in disgust. Does anybody know how to draw blood? The guy sweeping the floor said he did, and he did. The best phlebotomists seemed to toss the needle into the vein. The magnificent Dr. Sally Sloan was the chief of infectious diseases in Oakland. Jocelyn richly appreciated her, and her question to Dr. Sloan was full of recognition. So Bob, is your puzzle to solve, and you enjoy that. Let's see where we are. A nurse put a catheter called a pick in my arm with a tube that traveled to my heart. Chavi and I had to pass a test on administering the antibiotic with its complicated protocol taught indifferently by a nurse who began every session with the audacious question, "Do you recognize me?" about her radically altered hairdo. When Denny questioned some inconsistency, she derailed him by finishing his sentence, as though she had prompted us to catch a mistake, a clever lesson within a lesson. I had been in the hospital for only 6 days, but when we walked out late in the afternoon on August 4th, I was surprised by the wind and heat, and by weather generally. I was on Chavi's arm, of course, my dear husband. A million thank yous and as many kisses. Something's coming at the door. Did you hear that? The doorbell? Well, I'm gonna go ahead a little bit and just read a few paragraphs at the end. Let's see. I changed in a day from a highly functioning human to a deteriorating blob that couldn't dress itself. How patient and tender Chavi has been. He didn't let me see how he suffered, my friends told me later. Perhaps more than I suffered. It's easier to be the sick one, is it not? The drama's drastic center. It's easier to be the one who is dying. Chavi used to sleep as soundly as any mammal, regardless of my activities. Now he wakes when I stir. One thing I've learned during the past 3 months is what it feels like to utterly collapse and fall apart in his arms. Do catastrophes summon good angels? Mine have been Denny Smith, Camille Roy, and Jocelyn Seidenberg. Sometimes I tremble uncontrollably. They assume it's withdrawal from the puny meds they are dispensing. Worried thought, is it? I was on opioids for 3 months. And I do feel chaotic now that I'm stopping, degraded inside, corrupt. Wrongness is happening along with chills and anxiety. I am trying to return to normal, but what was that? What is that? Where does the feeling of normalcy reside? With new feelings, will new feelings prevent old feelings from taking hold? The color blue is normal, but what do I mean by that? I want plans, house projects, dinners, travel. Can I dodge the feeling as I used to that death is at hand? Javi goes down to listen to the band. He returns from the crowd to find me slumped over, dead. Poor Chavi always discovers my corpse. Who else could I trust with this vulnerability? It doesn't matter who sees it next. Is normal what the tongue feels inside the mouth? Is normal the self that dissolves before sleep? The white cup on the sill? Maybe so. I fell apart and now I feel more spacious. Do I relate to you differently? Will I always have pain? Did I always have pain? Will I be normal when 4 or 5 finally fuse? Will I continue to be an emotional slob, weeping freely when Fireman Bill climbs the maple on daytime TV and saves Fluffy the cat? I don't do that anymore. Camille says, I went to the edge of the cliff with Angie and she fell off. I went to the edge with you when you recovered the miracle people hope for so desperately. At night, Chavi drapes his arm over a lover who can't bend, twist, or lift 5 pounds. What priorities have changed? What attitudes reorganized to my writing, to the day? Thanks for reading this saga. You received it because you are my friend. I suppose sending you my story marks a stage in my recovery. Wanting to engage with you after being isolated by illness for so long. Thanks for being my friend. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. That was harrowing.